Loneliness is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of rupture. And every rupture frightens those who are still stuck in the old system. We live in a society that idolizes constant connection. Be present. Don't isolate yourself. Share more. But what if excessive presence is precisely what is distancing us from ourselves? From an early age, we are trained to fear silence. If we are alone, something is wrong. If we don't respond to messages, we are cold. If we prefer our own company, we are strange. They have created a collective panic around solitude. But why? If this topic makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Because an individual who is comfortable with their own presence becomes free, and free people are unpredictable. They don't buy what they don't need. They don't accept what they don't believe in. They don't follow what they don't respect. It's a risk to any system that depends on collective validation to maintain itself. The truth is simple but uncomfortable. You have been trained to fear loneliness because it disables control mechanisms. A human being who can remain silent is no longer controllable. They think, they choose, they cut out the excess, they become sovereign again. The fear of loneliness is engineered. It is a project of emotional domestication. And the more you believe you need to be surrounded by stimuli, the less you realize you are surrounded by distractions. Think about it. The most lucid moments of your life, those when everything seemed to make sense, almost always happened away from the noise. In the middle of the night, at the end of a walk, inside a closed room, alone, at peace. There, something awakened, a clarity that disappeared as soon as the world started shouting again. So this idea that loneliness is weakness is a useful lie. Useful for those who prefer you dependent, needy, and conformist. But what if, in fact, loneliness is sacred territory, a field where the mind can breathe again, where the ego melts away and the essence begins to appear? Maybe you don't need to run away from loneliness. You need to dive into it. Have you ever stopped to notice how much noise fills your day? Notifications, feeds, voices, empty promises of connection. You're bombarded all the time. But what is all this really hiding? Fear. Fear of facing the emptiness inside. We live surrounded by stimuli precisely so we don't have to face the silence. Because silence reveals what we avoid: the absence of meaning, the lack of direction, the emptiness of a life shaped by others. Noise is anesthesia. It prevents you from realizing how far you are from yourself. And the more you drown in stimuli, the more you feel accompanied, when in fact you are completely disconnected. It's like a crowded shopping mall. Lights, sounds, smells, movement. But everyone inside carrying a silent feeling of emptiness. A rush with no destination. Consumption without purpose. It's the mirror of our age, full of connections, empty of bonds. Now think, when was the last time you were in complete silence for more than an hour? No music, no cell phone, no talking to anyone. The discomfort that arises is no accident. It's your essence crying out for space. Noise is comfortable because it avoids painful questions. What do I really want? Who am I when no one is looking? Do I like my life? Or have I just learned to put up with it? These questions are dangerous to the system. Because if you start answering them honestly, everything that has been built on lies begins to crumble. That's why noise has become the norm. Because silence has become subversive. But here's the key. Those who can endure silence begin to hear what is essential. They begin to hear their own truth. And that changes everything. Most people prefer noise because it doesn't require change. Silence, on the other hand, requires courage. It shows what is wrong and demands action. Are you ready to hear what the noise has been hiding? Because only after this internal confrontation can the true process of transformation begin. Silence is not absence. It is total presence. A fertile field where consciousness begins to form with clarity. In our noisy society, silence has become a nuisance. But for those in search of clarity, it is a true laboratory. It is there that the mind slows down, that internal noises take shape, and that true identity begins to reveal itself. Silence is like fire in a forge. Pure steel is only born in heat and pressure. In the same way, consciousness only emerges when the ego stops shouting and the soul begins to whisper. At first, silence is frightening. It seems empty. But if you resist the urge to flee, it begins to transform. First comes restlessness, then comes observation, finally, clarity. It is at this stage that you begin to notice what previously went unnoticed. Thought patterns, recurring emotions, behavioral addictions. You begin to see yourself, not with the eyes of vanity, but with the coldness of lucidity. Without silence, this vision never happens. You keep reacting to the world without understanding why. You keep repeating cycles thinking it's fate, when in fact it's just a lack of awareness. Silence reveals. It gives you a map of your emotional addictions. It shows you where you betray yourself, where you sabotage yourself, where you lie to yourself. And that's not comfortable, but it's liberating. Because with awareness comes choice, and with choice comes power. Most people avoid this process because it requires confrontation. But those who face silence with courage discover something. That is not where the end lies, that is where reinvention begins. In noise you survive. In silence, you are reborn. After silence reveals itself, the next step is harder. Letting go of what is no longer you. This is the moment of reckoning. The phase where it's not enough to just see. You have to act. Break ties, abandon masks, leave old versions of yourself behind. And that's scary, because every break involves loss. But it also opens up space for real freedom. The problem is that many people cling to their own prison. Suffocating relationships, unhealthy jobs, sabotaging habits. All of this continues because there is still a fear of being alone. Fear of losing external validation. Fear of no longer being validated. But here's the twist. True freedom is not born when you achieve something outside yourself. It is born when you manage to let go of what no longer serves you. Letting go isn't being cold. It's being honest. It's looking at what holds you back and asking, does this still represent me? Or is it just here because I'm afraid of the void? Those who don't learn to let go live accumulating dead weight. People, ideas, beliefs, memories, all piled up, blocking progress. And this emotional debris blocks the path to authenticity. Letting go takes courage because it messes with your identity. The things you've been repeating for years start to crumble. But amid the rubble, a new version begins to emerge. A cleaner, stronger, more authentic version of yourself. In this context, loneliness becomes an ally, because when you're alone, you realize what's essential, what's noise, and what's true. Most people try to fill the void with quick substitutes. Another person, another addiction, another distraction. But those who can endure the interval between one cycle and another are reborn. That's the point. You are only truly free when you can look at something that was once everything and choose to let it go. Are you willing to let go of what has defined you, to discover what can still transform you? The dive goes deeper when you finally turn your gaze inward, and you begin for the first time to truly see yourself. You've gone through the silence. You've let go of what was weighing you down. Now comes the most revealing part, looking inward and finally seeing yourself. But be careful. This looking is not poetic. It's surgical. It's uncomfortable. Because for the first time, there are no filters, no audience, no excuses. Just you, naked, raw, real. This is where most people stop. Because seeing yourself requires crossing the mirror of illusion. And that mirror was built over years. By family expectations, by social comparisons, by the versions you created to be accepted. But at this point in the journey, loneliness has already strengthened you enough to face this journey. And it is brutal. You begin to realize that much of what you thought was you was just conditioning. Your opinions, your tastes, your reaction patterns. Everything may have been inherited, imitated, or absorbed without a filter. But now, with silence inside and detachment in place, a new power emerges. The power to question. You start asking, is this mine or was it given to me? Do I believe this or am I just repeating it? Who am I without this past weighing me down? These questions are not philosophical. They are tools for digging. And the more you dig, the more you find. Old fears, poorly digested traumas, ignored desires, forgotten potential. Inner vision is the mirror that does not lie. It shows what needs to be healed, what must be integrated, what can be expanded. What's more, it shows you the strength you've always had, but which was buried under layers of adaptation. This is the point where you stop seeing yourself as a victim and start seeing yourself as a creator. Not because everything is resolved, but because now you see clearly. And clarity is the first step towards sovereignty. Many have walked this path before, and it was in solitude that they found the stage for their own awakening. History is full of them, men and women who at some point in their lives withdrew from the world and returned different. Nietzsche, voluntarily exiled in the Alps, wrote his most powerful texts in complete isolation. Jung delved into his own psyche, alone, to face the unconscious. Buddha sat under the fig tree in silence until everything was revealed. Christ withdrew to the desert for 40 days before beginning his mission. Each, in their own way, used solitude as a rite of passage. And why does this matter? Because greatness is not born in applause, it is born in emptiness. In the moment when you are confronted only with your truth. And those who do not run away from it, those who remain, return with something the world cannot ignore: presence. These masters did not flee society out of arrogance. They withdrew because they knew that certain answers do not come from outside. They come from inner silence, and they can only be heard far from the noise of the crowd. The solitude they experienced was not abandonment. It was a strategic choice, a gesture of courage, a break with what is shallow to dive into what is deep. This process hurts, because isolation tears away the superficial layers of the ego. It removes the makeup of the social persona. And when that happens, what remains is the essential, the raw truth, the real strength, the brutal clarity. These masters returned from silence with something that cannot be bought, learned from books or copied: inner authority. And this authority does not depend on approval. It does not need likes, followers, or applause. It exists on its own. And that is why it has such an impact. Because the presence of someone who has been through the desert carries a weight that no one can fake. These figures show that loneliness is not an end. It is a process of alchemy. The ego enters. Consciousness leaves. Now the question is, who are you when no one is looking? Everyone knows how to perform. In front of others, we wear masks, modulate our tone, show only the side we want them to see. But what about when no one is looking? Who are you when there is no audience? That is the real test. The test that has no external judge, but reveals what really sustains you inside. In solitude, no character can resist. The mask slips, the pose tires, the truth appears. And that's when character shows itself. Not what you show the world, but what you are when the world isn't watching. Do you respect yourself in the absence of witnesses? Do you keep your word even without applause? Are you disciplined even without pressure? Do you have values that remain the same even in the dark? These are the questions that solitude asks, and they are cruel, because the answer does not come with words. It comes with actions, with repeated choices day after day, when no one will know. It's easy to be honest when someone is watching. The hard part is maintaining your integrity when only you know what you're doing. And that's the big twist. Loneliness gives you the chance to prove to yourself what you're made of. It takes away your external crutches. There's no more "I only did that because of so-and-so." It's just you, your intentions, and your consequences. In this raw space, the ego begins to crumble, because the ego thrives on the reactions of others. And when there are no others and the ego doesn't know what to do, but the spirit, on the other hand, flourishes in absence. It doesn't need an audience. It needs silence, repetition, honesty. Those who endure this test, those who cross the valley where there is no one to praise or validate them, come out the other side different, more solid, more centered, immune to the emotional blackmail of the outside world. This is true power, acting correctly without needing to be seen. Are you willing to face this kind of loneliness? This process changes everything about how you relate to the world. Less neediness, more awareness, and more choice. Once you see yourself for who you really are, face the silence and pass the test of solitude, something changes forever. Your relationship with the world. Before, you adapted to please others. Today you choose consciously. Before, you gave in out of neediness. Now, you interact out of conviction. The game changes because the center has shifted, and now it's inside you. Most people live under an unconscious social contract, invisible agreements with society. If I act this way, I will be accepted. If I pretend this, I will be approved. If I follow the script, I will be loved. This contract is signed out of fear, reinforced by insecurity, and rarely questioned. But those who have experienced deep loneliness have already broken this contract because they understand that the price of acceptance is often one's very soul. When you reclaim your autonomy, you realize you don't need so many ties, you need real ties. You don't need so much attention, you need real presence. You don't need to be understood by everyone. You just need to be true to yourself. This new attitude scares those who are used to your previous version. They will try to pull you back to the script. They will say that you have changed, that you have become cold, that you are distant. And the answer is simple. You just woke up. The new contract you are writing now has other clauses. I connect with those who vibrate on the same frequency. I do not trade my peace for any sense of belonging. I prefer a few real ones to many superficial ones. This new agreement is not about arrogance. It's about clarity. Those who have gone through loneliness and survived no longer have time for games. They don't beg for affection, bow down for crumbs, or adorn social lies. You start choosing where to put your energy, and that choice is silent, but it is powerful. The world notices when someone has returned from loneliness a different person. Your presence speaks. Your absence is uncomfortable. Your calmness is disarming. Are you ready to live according to your own truth, even if it takes you away from some people? And when this new being returns to the world, something changes. They influence without having to beg. When someone returns from true solitude, they don't come back seeking applause. They come back with presence, and presence is magnetic. The lonely person who has rebuilt themselves doesn't need to shout. They don't need to convince. They just are. And their simple existence bothers those who still depend on external approval to validate their own. It's the paradox. The less you seek influence, the more it happens. Because the energy of those who no longer beg is irresistible. It carries silent authority, specific weight, non-negotiable clarity. This kind of influence is rare because it doesn't come from social techniques or emotional manipulation. It comes from alignment, from someone who is whole inside, from someone who has looked at themselves in the mirror of emptiness and didn't run away. People feel this, and without knowing why, they pay attention. Because deep down, everyone wants this freedom, but few are willing to pay the price of loneliness that builds it. The return of the lonely is not marked by speeches. It is marked by posture, by firm decisions, by a peace that cannot be explained, but which disarms. That is the real influence, not the one that drags you along with noise, but the one that guides you by silent example. Those who no longer need to be noticed become references. Those who no longer depend on applause become mirrors. Those who no longer mold themselves become models. And that irritates those who still live for performance, because the presence of the authentic reveals the artificiality of the rest. They do not accuse. They do not point fingers. They just are. And that is enough to disrupt fragile structures. This influence is not about control. It is about consistency. And the consistency of someone who has found themselves in the dark is unbreakable. Are you ready to be that presence that transforms without needing to dominate? We have reached the end. And here is the raw truth. Loneliness, which so many avoid, is not weakness. It is a ritual. It is a passage. It is a natural filter that separates those who continue on autopilot from those who dare to awaken. Every real transformation requires a symbolic death, and loneliness is that field where old versions die, so that something more authentic can be born. That's why it hurts. That's why it scares us, because it dismantles us. But only those who accept dismantling themselves can rebuild themselves on another level. This is the cycle that few complete. Most retreat halfway through. They return to the noise, the applause, the theater. But those who make it to the end come back different. They come back simpler, more steadfast, more sober. Loneliness becomes a portal. And on the other side, there is not isolation. There is power. A kind of power that does not depend on anyone, but transforms everyone around you. Because it comes from within. It comes from clarity. It comes from truth. You do not return to the world as before. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to belong. You just exist, again, with purpose, with direction, with presence. This is the invitation that solitude offers to the brave. Let go of the noise, face the emptiness, find yourself, and then return as someone who not only lives, but leads by example. Solitude was your silent training. Now it is your solid foundation, your invisible armor, your portable sanctuary. You no longer fear being alone, because you have learned that this is where you grow the most, and that awareness changes everything. So if you are crossing the valley of absence, understand, this is not the end. It is the beginning of something greater. Does it hurt? Great. Is it uncomfortable? Even better, because it is in discomfort that the true I begins to emerge. And when that self awakens, the world adjusts. Now the final question is, will you run away again? Or will you accept the invitation of solitude as a call to greatness? If this content made sense to you, leave a like. See you in the next video.